Hi guys, this is Nguyen from VS Property Strategies and welcome to my latest podcast episode where I'm interviewing Viv Halliday. She's a renovator extraordinaire and also a property magnate where she's collecting properties and tenants over a short period of time. She's got a handful of mini boarding houses, and on this interview, you're going to learn how she's been able to transition from renovating and land subdivision to being able to build a mini boarding house portfolio of up to 20, if not 25 tenants in a short period of time. So she's got a handful of properties that she's built and rented, as well as she's got 2 on the go right at this point in time. So we're going to go through and talk with her and get her to share with us, 1, what the advantages and disadvantages of mini boarding houses are. 2, should you renovate and convert your house into a mini boarding house? 3, what is rooming accommodation or mini boarding houses as we call it? 4, the advantages of using mainstream banks versus other specialized banks. So there's a lot to cover there. And if you're interested in learning how to do rooming accommodation, renovation conversions into rooming accommodation, this is the episode to listen to. So get ready, gear up, let's go. Morning, guys. Nguyen from VS Property Strategies, and welcome to my latest podcast series called Your Next Property Deal. And in this particular season, we're talking about mini boarding houses, also known as rooming accommodation. There's different names across different states. Some states call it co-living. Some states call it rooming accommodation. And like I mentioned before, we like to call our mini boarding houses. From a building class point of view, usually it fits in roughly the 1B category. Sometimes it can fit into the other categories as well of building classes. But for the sake of what we're doing, which is usually 9 tenants or 10 tenants or under one roof, and usually, not always, they generally have their own bathrooms and or kitchenettes. But every state's different, every council's different. And this morning, we've got Viv Halliday from Property Possibilities, and she's been a client of mine for a handful of years now. And she used to spend a bit of time with the Reno Kings, good old Jeff and Paul there. And yeah, she's done a stack of renos as well as working on a handful of mini boarding houses currently. So Viv, welcome.
Hi, how are you?
Yeah, wonderful. And it's always great to have you with us. You're always enthusiastic and you're always busy doing something. So there's a never dull moment there. So do you want to just give us a bit of background on your experience with renos and property generally? I nickname Viv Colombo, where she pretends not to know anything. But she's the encyclopedia of property and renovation. So don't be shy, Viv. This is your chance to shine.
I guess I started property. I started property when I was really young, like even the first house that we bought, we renovated it. It was back in the days that apricot was popular. So I covered the mission brown with apricot. So that's how far back it goes, because now we're painting over the apricot. I fell into a role with the Reno Kings. I went to one of their events and I ended up being their bookkeeper, then their event manager, joined Property Women, was their event manager, did multitudes of renos on the way, and also did a few developments on the way. And then I've joined Nhan, and I've done a lot more on the mini boarding house side. So I've got 1 retrofit under my belt and 2 builds. One's just finishing, and I've got another retrofit coming up. So yeah.
Wonderful. Yeah, no, exciting stuff. So I suppose most people start with basic renovations, cosmetic renovations, which I say to people is a necessary skill because it allows you to look into and have insight into other project management processes, whether it's removal homes, structural renovations, as well as reno conversions or renovation conversions, as we call it. So, tell us why, at this part of your journey, because you've done land subdivisions, you've done a lot of renos, structural and cosmetic renos. Why at this part of your journey that you're looking at doing, or you are doing mini boarding houses or rooming accommodation?
I just think the income from it is a lot better. I had a small little high set, what they call in Brisbane a high set, so upstairs, downstairs, and it was legal height under. So my first go at that was to actually build that into a mini boarding house. So it went from as a single dwelling. I changed it into upstairs, downstairs, and then I changed it into 4. Well, it's basically just on 4 times what I was getting. So it's made the property hugely positive, and it gives people a home. And they're really nice little apartments, comfy. They've got everything in them. I think during COVID, that would have been one of my things. If I needed somewhere, I would have wanted something with my own area, and I didn't have to share bathrooms and kitchens and all that sort of thing, which is usually the worst part when you're sharing a house. Somebody doesn't do the dishes, or they leave the bathroom messy, that sort of thing. At least this gives you a really nice way of living, and it's all yours.
Yeah.
Yes, some facilities, but hey, it's an ideal situation.
Look, that's the thing, is that there is a niche for this, and especially with the rental crisis that we're experiencing currently. I'll share a little bit with the listeners there what my experience with rooming accommodation was, because I believe that multiple sources of income is great. That's one of the goals of any investor or developer or person in business, is multiple sources of income, right? So rather than having one source of income, let's say your job or your business, being self-employed, having 5 sources of income, having 10, having 20, having 100 plus sources of income. So, why not dream big? So, I didn't have a good experience with rooming accommodation initially, but I'll share that with people at a later date. But now I'm really into it again, because we've been able to solve a few of those fundamental issues and accepting better tenants. So the things that you mentioned there, like having their own facilities like kitchenettes, or en suites. How does that work? Explain to the layperson out there who's just about to buy their first investment property. They're probably even looking at negative gearing. Well, how do these rooming accommodation setups work in your area there, Viv?
Yeah, so say in the new build, it's basically designed so that they have their own little kitchenette. I don't think it's classed as that, maybe a bar, but it has got a sink in it. They've got their own bathroom, so it's all really private. Some of them have got separate bedrooms, some of them have got just a bedroom area. They've got their own TV, sofa, table, chairs. They've basically got a tiny apartment, which they would have to pay, like $400 or $500 a week for, plus all your outgoings. And a lot of these things are renting between about $360 and $400 these days, depending on the area. But that's inclusive of everything. You don't have to worry about water. You don't have to worry about electricity. You don't have to worry about internet even. It's all there. You just walk in, unpack your bags, and you're sorted.
Yeah, and I think I really like that idea from an all-inclusive point of view. I know that, from a customer service point of view, when you can do something that you don't have to worry and micromanage your electricity bill, your water bill, your internet bill, you literally turn up on day one, the internet's fast, the water's warm, you don't have to ring a power provider to disconnect there. You don't have to worry about internet, and it's all inclusive, which is really cool. And the other things you've talked about is furnishing. So it's fully furnished with beds, cutlery, toasters, chairs, a small dining table, outdoor furniture possibly, so, and TV as well. So it makes it easier from a capital investment point of view. Is the tenant there just literally, like you said, has a suitcase, their laptop, and they come in and off they go. Is that pretty much the case?
Pretty much, and we've had such a range of people. It's really diverse. We've had people that have gone back to do their masters. We've had people that are arriving for a new job in the area and they don't know their way around, so they will to figure out where they want to be, and sometimes they stay on. We've had like retired people, so it sort of suits so many different people. And with having all of those different sorts of people in one house, you'd sort of think that'd be an issue, but because they're all separate, really, unless they want to bake a cake, they're on their own, and little microwaves and things. You can bake a cake. Most people don't these days, I tell you. It's sort of like just frost and it's all good.
So let's clarify what you mean there, because I know what you're talking about. Let's target this as at the beginner there, and why the baking a cake is an interesting conversation. So I think what Viv's talking about is usually there is a common area or a common kitchen which has a fully fledged kitchen, and it has the laundry facilities. It'll have an oven, and it'll have a cooktop as well. And so with each of the rooms, however, they don't have a fully fledged oven. The common room has the main stove and oven. Is that what you're talking about there?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah,
Yep.
but they can, plug in appliances if they want to. I don't know.
Yeah, and that's what we
exactly. On if they want to, I provide them with a little induction cooktop and a mic. So most people are quite adept with cooking with that.
Yeah, that's right. Inside the kitchenette, it's like, if you've got a sink, it might be a vanity basin, and next to that, you've got a microwave that's handy, that sits on a little fridge there. So that's handy as well. So I suppose in summary, moving forward, is that different states have different rules, and different councils have different rules on how many tenants that you can put into what these called 1Bs or rooming accommodation. So from my experience, let's say Brisbane City Council, you can put in 5 tenants. In Gold Coast, it's 4. Is that right, Viv?
Yes, it's 4. Although there's about maybe that changing, but the one that I'm about to do, I'll just be doing 4.
Yeah, and I found that in Brisbane, they don't charge infrastructure charges or extra fees to be able to put those 5 tenants in one building. However, in other cities, councils, let's say Ipswich or Logan or Moreton Bay, you can do 5 tenants in one individual house, but I think you have to pay contributions, which works out to be roughly $70,000 to $80,000 on top of the price of the land, to be able to get that approval, which, it's pretty crazy, because the Housing Summit talks about how do we increase housing and improve the tenancy situation and co-living, et cetera, but I find that the fees and charges to be able to enable that to happen is definitely counterproductive there. So let's talk about, Viv. In the past, you've had some buy and holds. We've talked about property. You've had some, blocks of flats and things like that. Why mini boarding houses versus holding other types of property, based on your vast property experience?
Look, there's always that capital growth, which is really good, and that's definitely a good way to go. But one, being able to hold it, being able to rent it to 5 different people, brings the income up. Also, you don't, if one tenant leaves, you're not left high and dry. You've got 4 others, so it's not a big gap in your income when somebody moves. From the ones that I've had, basically somebody moves out and moves in the next day. There is sort of no shortness, but I'm getting towards retirement, probably not for a little while yet, but looking towards that, and I want an income stream. So this is a great way of creating an income stream. And I mean, you don't have to go near retirement to get an income stream. It's just having money coming in the door than going out.
Look, retirement doesn't mean you're old. Retirement just means a change in lifestyle choice, right? So it can mean whatever you want it to mean. But so tell us about your first reno conversion, and what were some of the learnings there? Because now you're on to your 4th and 5th, and most people go, oh, wow, she can do that. But, the first one, it's a self-managed super fund. Tell us about that reno conversion, some of the challenges, some of the things that you learned, so people who are beginning, they can get more value out of it and appreciate that.
Yeah, so having done a few renos, I thought it would be a breeze. It's just renovating, right? So technically, yes, but what you're actually doing when you're actually changing from a 1A to a 1B is upgrading everything so it's to code. So you have to bring that house up to the National Construction Code, which means, your windows, like your white ant treatment, probably, I don't know whether that's everywhere, but you've got to show that that's done. If you've got extractor fans in bathrooms, if you've got a steel colour bond roof, you can't have it going into that because the code has changed. So you therefore have to upgrade it and put a whirlybird on it. You have to make sure your stormwater is going in the right place. There's so many things. So you basically big, long list of things that you've actually got to bring the house up to code for.
Yeah.
So it's not just a quick reno and flick it. You do actually have to look at the house that you buy and make sure that there's not too much to bring it up to code. Otherwise, you'll spend a lot of money on that, which won't be seen, and not so much on separating it into different areas. But that's another thing. If you're doing a retrofit, you really do need to get something that is large enough, probably has a few bathrooms, so it's going to save you some money for putting extra bathrooms in, but make sure the plumbing's accessible, because like if it's on a slab, it's a little bit harder to get access. Just the design, whether you can actually sort of move a few walls around or whether you've got to move 10 walls around, which is a really big deal then.
Yeah, so let's just pause on that, because there's a lot of things that you've covered, and I know that for you it's subconscious and you're just like juggling 13 different balls all at the one time while you're checking your phone and uploading photos of your Instagram with your houses. But my point is, I think from what you've said there, I wouldn't jump in and straight do a reno conversion as a beginner necessarily, right? It'd probably be easier to buy a new one, buy and build a new one where the builder understands all the compliance issues versus a conversion. Would you say the first one for someone who's beginning would be easier to buy or build a brand new one? Would you say that?
For the first one, definitely a build. I think my build was actually happening roughly around the same time, but by building one, it actually enabled me to actually see what the process was and what things were going into it and why done that way. Plus, it's basically you get the design, you check it out, you hand it over to the builder, and then you, like I am today, and setting up all the furniture. It is so much easier.
Yeah, so much easier. And look, part of that is finding the right builder. There are a whole bunch of different builders you can work with, and I know over time I will be interviewing a handful of them in various states, hopefully, if not just at least a couple of them in Queensland just to get started. But I think, from what you've said there, I think compliance is critical there for those who are doing reno conversions. Having a good certifier is critical there. If you don't have a certifier who understands the process, can work with you and encourage you versus just say, no, you can't do that, you can't do that. There's going to be a lot of people who don't understand the 1B process and don't understand the 1B rules, and it's going to cost you a lot of money because they are too stringent or they're too conservative because they don't understand how far they can push or where the boundaries are. So basically we've covered that, and so we've talked about your reno conversion, and now your second, third and fourth were brand new builds. So your fourth one is the one that you're currently doing. Is that out of the ground or is that finished? Or just tell us a little bit more about the one you're finishing right now.
Yeah, so that's actually, I had handover on Wednesday. So
awesome, congratulations.
That's great. So now I'm just putting all the furniture in, and it will be advertised online, I think Tuesday, Wednesday next week.
Wow. Yes.
Yeah. So.
And what's your projection on rents per room? I've got my idea because obviously I've seen the building. It's about 10 minutes from where I live. But what are your projections on the rent per room from highest to lowest, or lowest to highest?
Yeah, I think around the 380 to 400 a room.
Wow, that's pretty cool. So let's just work on 400 times 5. That's $2,000 a week. It's roughly 250 to 270 bucks a day of gross rent there. And so, it's a is it 2-story? Is it single story? How big is a block of land? And why did you build a 2-story? Or just give us a bit of a rundown on why you did what you did at that property there.
Yeah, so this was one that I actually saw, the block of land, and it had a house on it. It was a reno / I could see that it would be able to be subdivided. So it was 660 square meters, and it was within 200 meters of a centre zone. So just. So I had my backup plan that I could always renovate it and sell it on. But I saw that as an opportunity. So I split it into 2 330s. And at the time, I could have tried to work out a smaller planned to go on the 330, but it was difficult and I wanted to get something signed off and done. So there was one that would fit and it looked good. And it's basically given us a lot of room around the property. Like it doesn't take up a lot of property and it gives me 3 car spots at the front.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and parking is money as well. So you sort of add that on. So I went with that. That's what the builder offered and I liked it, so that I went with that. And then the next one, I'll probably look at doing a low set and tweaking it just to keep the costs down.
Yeah, awesome. So I think that's really cool. And that's one thing that I've discovered as well when you're doing these is there's a couple of other sources of income. And if you can make that space available, I know on my last one, I created a 4th car space where I couldn't put concrete, but I could put crusher dust next to a big protected tree. So that was an extra $15 a week. That's coming in passively with very little management required. So yeah, so what I've heard is, you know, car spaces are somewhere between $10 to $15 a week. And if you've got a garage, it can be, you know, around about the $25 a week for rent on top of the room rent, so which is pretty cool. So so overall, you know, to kind of summarize for people who are beginners once again is, you know, what would you say the advantages and disadvantages would be of a rooming accommodation / mini boarding house play in this instance, you know, having 5 tenants or 4 tenants on the Gold Coast there?
Look, I don't see too many disadvantages. I do see, you know, like the rent obviously is great. You're actually holding on to a block of land and that's going to rise in value as well. And in the meantime, you're actually getting good income. You're providing some great houses and that for people to live in, nice tiny units. And so it's a win-win for the tenants as well as you. What I do think is possibly a downfall is that you need to get somebody to manage it that's really good, because I don't want to run around with 4 tenants or 5 tenants and, you know, like answer all those things and keep up with codes. So getting a really good property manager makes your life so easy. Like honestly, the guys that we use, I just don't have to deal with anything. So it makes my life. I drop off, you know, like a Christmas little basket for them at Christmas and batteries to change their door locks. That's about it. All I do. Everything else, you know. And I sort of go around to just check on it because I want to make sure that things are, you know, being kept to my standard. But these guys are great, and I don't have to worry about it. So
yeah, I think the parts that it's taken us a few years to get comfortable with, because I know that they've been around for a while, these team members like the builder, the certifier, we'll talk about finance soon, but that's a critical part. And then the rental manager and finding the right tenant for the right place, because you don't want to necessarily have one of these out in the boondocks necessarily, because the construction costs can be a bit prohibitive, you know, somewhere between $450 and $550, depending on the size of the building, just as a rough numbers there. So having the right team, I think, is critical. I think they charge around about the 8.8% for the rental management, which I think is priceless. Like you said, is you've got a handful of these now, so do I. And yeah, you really want it to be a passive scenario, right, where the tenants just keep paying the rent. Yes, you're paying your management fee, but it allows you to scale. So it means that if you have double the number of tenants you have now, or triple the number of tenants you have now, so let's say you got 15 now and you can go to 30 or 45 tenants, yeah, the level of management is the same because you've got the generally brand new appliances and everything's quite new. And within, you know, you might have to change them every 3 to 5 years, depending on the appliance there. But you're not changing taps and toilets and all that because the buildings are new and you're not worrying about plumbing issues, asbestos, those kind of things, gravel going everywhere. So, which is really cool. So have you had any bad experiences to date with rooming just ever? Like even before you started doing these reno conversions there, Viv?
Look, I probably had more dramas with normal tenants than with these tenants.
Yes.
You know, I haven't had any problems with, you know, people not paying their rent or, you know, making a mess of the houses or causing problems with neighbours or anything like that. Whereas I have had in the past, like a duplex that I had some guy in that was like making chicken noises outside the back of the next unit, you know, like, or I've had people that have sort of made a mess of the place, or, you know, like turned to drugs and I've had to evict them, that sort of thing. Well, I haven't any of that. And I think the beauty of having 5 people, if one of them sees that something is a mess, or somebody is being a nuisance, they don't have to deal with it. They just get onto the property managers right onto it, and it's sorted. But just one tenant, or you don't know what's going on. The neighbours don't necessarily tell you.
Right.
So go on your 3 monthly check, you go, oh, actually might have a problem. So I actually see that's a bonus as well.
Look, I think there's a few things that you mentioned, which is really important, is that in these ones in particular, it's one tenant per room. So, and if they have 2 tenants and they breach that in this instance, based on the regulations with the Brisbane City Council anyway, is all they need is a 24 hours notice to be kicked out. So room accommodation is very, very flexible from a landlord point of view, as opposed to a tenant point of view and the normal RTA, Residential Tenancies Authority scenario. So it's very, very much protected there. So if the tenant stuffs up, if the tenant breaches, they don't pay their rent, or they have their girlfriend or boyfriend over for too long, they can be kicked out. So because you want to maintain that restriction, you think, oh, geez, it's not fair. I can't have my girlfriend over 4 nights a week. Well, they got to understand that your insurance actually only covers your building for 5 tenants of 1 tenant per room at a time. So that's part of our issue as well. And insurance is very expensive, as you know. It's twice, if not 3 times, what a normal property is. The other downside is the tenants chewing up electricity and consuming water. Obviously, the way we compensate for that, or kind to deal with that, is put solar panels on, 15 kilowatt solar panels, to ensure that the power is not too expensive there. I think the other thing I've found, because based on my bad experiences with rooming, is that my previous tenants in Stafford there, let's say, I had one, it was a 6-bedder, and I was charging them $100 a week per room. That was back in 2003, 2004, right? That attracted a different type of tenant. These tenants that were renting these rooms they had a shared bathroom. I think it was 2 bathrooms between 6, and one shared kitchen, and people would steal each other's food, and they were getting to Barney's. There were domestics. There was cops coming around all the time. So because the rent was so cheap, oftentimes they would be paying it with rent assistance, or government subsidies or Centrelink. So they weren't working; they were often at home. And then when you're at home and you're bored and having a few smokes and a bit of drugs there, it starts to cause havoc. Whereas these guys, when they're paying $350 or $400 a week, they can't be supported on Centrelink. Generally, we work on a 3-to-1 rule or 1-to-3 rule, where the rent is generally supported by an income 3 times that, right? So they'd be having to earn at least $1,000 a week, and you can't get that on Centrelink. You need to be driving a truck or working at a blue, if not white collar job. So is that your experience there, Viv, with the types of tenants that you're getting? They're generally workers, whether it's white collar, blue collar, full-time, part-time at least, they're at work most of the time during the day, as opposed to at home gaming?
Absolutely. And some of them, I haven't got one that I know of in mind, but sometimes FIFO workers, that's ideal for them. They've just basically somewhere to live. They don't have to worry about lawn, anything like that, and they don't have to worry about you sort of paying bills. You just go to sleep and off you go.
That's right. That's right. Paying their rent, and then you don't have to worry about water and electricity and things like that. So let's start to move to the final part of this interview then, is tips on funding these. Obviously, I'm about to interview a finance broker very, very shortly on the next episode. So, but without going into too much detail and bamboozling people, but you're laughing, you're smiling there. Finance, it can be a bit of a nightmare, but just give us the duck's nuts, or the short summary of your journey, and any advice to potential investors.
It is a difficult area because not very many banks see these sort of properties as desirable. So they're happy to have like a 5-bed, 5-bath house, but they won't value it up to like what these are really worth. They don't like single income. They don't like the rooms rented by the room. So when you actually go to get finance, you basically have to get finance for a normal house. I actually had one that was probably on the last two drawdowns from the bank, and they came in and said, no, we don't like it, there's extra walls, so please, whatever you put to the bank is please build to that, because I won't like it. So they just stopped funding, and I'm like 2/3, 3/4 of the way through a build, and they just went, no, not paying it. So luckily I had backup. I paid it. The builder kept going anyway. He was really good. And at the end of the day, when it came to final, they paid it. So
no, that's good.
They obviously thought, well, yeah, okay, there's a really good building here. Get our money back no matter what.
Yeah.
So,
look, that's the thing with the traditional banks. They just generally don't understand under a residential banner. They will understand it under commercial banner. However, the interest rates can be higher and the deposits can be more significant, i.e. the LVRs are lower. So I do suggest to people that, they do shop around and find a specialist lender, a finance broker who understands this product, because the smoke and mirrors that you play with banks can shoot you in the foot at the end of the day, especially if you're putting extra walls in, et cetera, et cetera. So very good. Viv, any parting tips for the beginner investor, general marketplace, on your take moving forward with mini boarding houses, or anything you want to share?
I think, I actually like what I've done with my self-managed super fund, because they're very hard to get something like this into the self-managed super fund, because you can't actually buy land and build. You have to have a housing product, and it has to stay as a so by retrofitting it, it's still staying as a housing product, but it's actually being rented and getting more income into it. I see the retrofit as a easier way of getting it into your self-managed super fund. It's just a little bit more difficult, a little bit more challenging. But once you've done a build, you sort of get the idea of it. It doesn't mean to say you can't get one through into your self-managed super fund. You can buy one that's already done and rent it out. They're just a lot more money, but you know there's still great income. But yeah, as far as this little product is concerned, it's just amazing. It fills so many buckets for so many people. So it fills my bucket as far as wanting income, and long term, the capital growth on it will still be there. There's nothing to say that if I wanted to sell it as a normal house, if I couldn't sell it as a mini boarding house, which would be a bit silly, but you know, you can actually retrofit it back to a normal house. So you've got, you want to sell it, we've got capital growth. You're actually providing really good accommodation people that really need it at the moment. So actually providing a service. And the banks are still making some money off here, so don't you worry. You know, banks and the bankers, they're not missing out at all.
Yeah.
So.
Look, I think it's taken a while for the market to really get their head around it as what type of product is it, where does it fit, how does it value up? You know, as you heard over the weekend, that at Acacia Ridge, one of these similar buildings vacant sold for $1.3 million. So, you know, let's say your land cost you $350 for the land, roughly $500 for the build, stamp duty, furniture, call it $850, call it $900 to round up numbers. And it's worth 1.3, you know, that's a good uplift. So you've got the cash flow if you choose to hold it, you've got the capital growth in terms of the manufactured equity, and then ongoing capital growth as well. You've got a positive cash flow property. So it's the obstacles of getting in and understanding the product, finding the builder, the right builder, getting the right plan, and not over capitalizing as well, because you could pay too much for the land. If you spend 550 600 grand and spend 500 on the build, you're up to the 1.2 mark. You may be able to add more value depending on the suburb, but you just got to watch your numbers. So excellent, Viv. Look, thanks for your time and your generosity. Let's keep in touch, and appreciate you participating with me on this first episode for my latest podcast. Catch you soon.
Thanks. Bye.
Hey guys, this is Nguyen. So hopefully you enjoyed that podcast interview with Viv Halliday from Property Possibilities, where she shared with us, her journey as being a renovator and how she's used her renovation skills, her land subdivision skills to create multiple sources of income onto her fourth and fifth mini boarding house there. So she's got a handful of mini boarding houses, up to 20, if not more, tenants there, paying her roughly between $300 and $400 a week in rent. So she's not only making wealth for herself, but she's providing quality housing for other tenants. So appreciate you joining us in there. Hopefully you really enjoyed that and got some value and learned how to, at least get started in rooming accommodation and mini boarding houses, and some of the pitfalls there of finding the right rental manager, finding the right builder, as well as providing and finding the right finance structure for you, because it is a bit of a minefield. And for those who are beginners, don't get too overwhelmed there. Feel free to join our Facebook group called Your Next Property Deal there. I look forward to joining you there and seeing you on our Facebook group with any questions that you might have. It's Your Next Property Deal on Facebook group there. This is Nguyen for Viv's Property Strategies. If you've got any questions for me or Viv, feel free to shoot them through on that property chat page there, Your Next Property Deal Facebook group there, and we'll catch up with you soon. See you later.